Okay, everyone, welcome back. Yes. I'm going to make Angular from scratch today. I'm just silly enough to try to do this in front of the very guy who wrote this, but it could be fun. So a little word about myself. I'm Matthieu Lux, I'm from Lyon. I'm Sweep on Twitter, and I also organize the Lyon JavaScript meetup. So if you're near, you come to see us, and I'm working at Zenica. Recently, I also started this geoman generator for Gulp and Angular, which has quite a success recently, so don't hesitate to give a look. This talk comes from afar. There is a long history, so I want to bring the references. A special thanks to Teropa. I don't try to speak this last name because it's quite complicated. So he's the first one who wrote a blog post on the approach of Angular by writing from the beginning, which is called Build Your Own AngularJS, and he started an ebook. So I recommend you to check this. I want to thank also my coworker Olivier Hubert, which first imagined to take this to a training format at Zenica. So let's back to the point. I think every one of you have already seen this demo of Angular, which you have no JavaScript at all. You just have two directives, and there is some magic. Okay. I think everyone have already seen this, but the problem of this demo is the magic, because developers don't really like magic, and they want to understand what's happening. And so the questions came, which is, what do I need in this script tag to make this demonstration work? So it will be the whole point of the demonstration today. I'm gonna try to make this work from scratch. In fact, we can explain all of this with this beautiful diagram, which I found on the official documentation. But believe me, I tried to explain Angular with this diagram in training, and it's not a big success each time. So the best solution I know to understand these mechanisms is the code. So let's get to this. So we start with a simple HTML with nothing happening at all. Okay. This is this HTML file. Everyone can read. Okay. Basically the same as the slide before. I just add some CSS to make it prettier, and I've included my JavaScript file, which is this one and is empty. I really start from nothing. So to organize a little myself, I will split the code in some parts. The first part will be my framework, the tiny Angular I will write today, and the second part will be tests and logs to just test what I'm doing. In the frameworks, I will implement two sides of Angular. A tiny bit of the scope, which will be enables me to get some change detection, and a bit of compiler, which enables me to look to the DOM, find the directives, and run them. Okay. For a starting point, I will need to implement my scope, to make an object where I can put my data watch for them, and gets listener functions when the data has changed. And in fact, in Angular, the scope, the basics of the scope is no more than a simple function. So let's get started, not function, just an object, of course. So let's start with the definition of the scope with a constructor just empty for now. And yes, it's my fellow JSint, which will help me to not make too much mistakes. So, in fact, when you start Angular in the bootstrap of Angular, it's always start a first scope, which is called the root scope. You probably already used it. To keep it simple, I will call this scope for now. So it's no more than a new scope. And in my test, I just want to put some data in my scope. Hello, NG Europe. OK. That's working. Of course, nothing happens unless I've got a scope object with some data in it. So let's get started with some Angular feature, which is the watch function. The watch function will be the function you will use if you want to watch something in Angular. So if I first write the code I want to use, if I am in the real Angular, I will write something like this: watch hello, and a listener function in which I will have my new value and the old value of the property. If I start by just logging this change, hello change from new, okay, from old value to new value. Okay, but this syntax needs, at this point, for the first parameter, we will need the Angular parser, which I don't have it right now. So I will use the second syntax of Angular, which is the watch with a function, which will be simpler for today. And it really exists in the real Angular, of course, and we have just to return the value we want to watch. So it's transformed by this. Of course, if I test this, it's an error because I don't implement it. OK. So let's get started with implemented a simpler version of the real watch function. Equal function, like this. OK. In fact, the watch function of Angular, it's the way the real one working. The watch function of Angular does nothing that just storing the watch in a list of all the watchers. And it's what we're going to do just now. We need a list of watchers like this. The watch function takes two parameters, the watcher function and the listener function. And the only usage of this function is to, OK, there are the watchers, push, and I regroup the two parameters in a single object like this. And this is actually not far from the real watch function. So now when you will write your own AngularJS code, you can imagine the watch function just like this one. The watcher function. OK. OK. So if I test this, of course, nothing really working, but I can see that I've got my watchers with an object with my two functions, my watch function, and still my data in the scope. So, of course, at this point, still nothing happens. So we have to start making the magic happen. And this magic in Angular is on the digest function. Perhaps if you are okay, perhaps if you just start with Angular, we never launch or seen the digest directly. You never launch the digest function, but you probably use the apply function, but we'll just see the link from the apply to the digest just after. So the digest function is actually where the magic happens and where the watchers are used. So in fact, the first thing there is in the digest is a loop on the watchers and the check on the watch value if the value has changed. So to start, we can simply ask for $watcher and go for each. Okay. In the for each, we have one watcher object, and we want to compare. Basically, we want to compare a new value of the watcher and an old value of the watcher. Is the core of the digest. To do this, we need to define new value and old value. New value is pretty simple. New value equals, it's the current result of the watcher function. Watcher.watcher function. Okay, nothing more than this. The old value is a little more complex. We don't have it right now. We have to store it from the last time we run the digest. So in fact, the old value is the new value from the last time, so we have to store it at the end of the function. Where to store the watcher object is the better place. So we can start a new property watcher.last equal new value. And by this, we know that the old value from this time is the last from the last execution. Nothing more than this. This little equal there is the dirty checking of Angular. And when we see a change, we just have to launch the listener function. So,
sorry,
yes.
Please just give a lines up so that you can see
Like this?
in the middle of the screen.
Okay. Sorry. Watcher.listener function with the right parameters, new value, old value. And just like this, if I don't launch the digest, nothing will happen. Scope.$digest. Just like this, we should have some magic. This is the basic core feature of the change detection of Angular. We could try to complexify a little with, sorry, but if I save, just go down. And if we launch several digests, we can check that there is only one change detection. We can put a little change at the middle of this with something like exclamation point, and we see that our change detection is working. Okay, let's get back to the scope. Our digest here is very simple, is working just enough to the rest of the demonstration, but as the real one is so much more complicated, I just created a little slide to explain to give some hint of what is the complexity which go on top of this to bring all the features of the scope. So for the first point, I've said I don't have the pass service, which is able to go from the string to the scope. So we need to add a pass. The real digest is in fact a loop, because when we find a change, we have to assume that the listener function could change the scope once again, and we have to run all the watchers one more time to see if there is a new change. So in fact, the digest is there is another loop outside the digest. If there is a loop, we have to add a limitation, because if the user changes the scope every time, there will be an infinite loop, and all will be broken. In Angular, you have the option comparison by value. You can not just check the pointers like I have just done there, but you can ask for the framework to compare every property in the object by value, even if it's not very performant. In Angular, you also have an optimization for watching the collection, which is really interesting. When you are watching collection, you never want to just look at pointers, but the elements in the collection. And you also have to check for phases, because if someone launch a digest when there is already a digest, you once again get an infinite loop and all is broken. So these points are just a hint of all the complexity there is on top of this scope. But for today, it's just enough. So like I said before, this is not the kind of code you will see in Angular. You will never call the digest directly. You will better call the apply function. So let's transform the code with an apply function. And you will probably do something like this. So we have to define the link between the apply function and the digest. And in fact, the link is very direct. This dot apply equal function. Okay. So I gave a function which I call expression function in parameter, and in fact the apply function is just a little more than launching the expression and launching the digest just after. There is one thing on top of it, is a try it finally. So finally, I said. So Angular can be sure that even if you throw some exception in your watchers, the digest cycle will not end, and Angular will still working, even if you watch some silly things which are broken. And that's actually very interesting. So if I come back on my test, we can see that the change detection is still working without asking directly for the digest. So it's enough for today for the scope, the core scopes change detection. So let's start to talk about the compiler. So the basic goal of the compiler is to look through the DOM, looking on each element of the DOM, and find the directives to start. So for the beginning, the compiler, like the real compiler, is a function, which the first role will be to recurse on the DOM tree. So it's in fact just a recursion. I will prepare all my parameters for later, and I will take the scope because it will be needed. So the first part of the compile is just a recursion. So I will just put some logs to see the elements where I am, and after not much that launching the compile function on each children of the element. Unfortunately, I have to use the element.children, which is from the DOM API, which unfortunately is a collection but not an array. So I have to put some dirty code, array.prototype for each call. Okay, just to make a for each on my children. Okay, and nothing more than launching the same compile on the child with the same scope. I have to not forget to run the compile. I will start on the document.body and use my scope. Okay. I'm lucky it's working. So we see the body, the H1, the H2, the input, the script. So we pass through all the elements of the document. At this point, we know that we are passing there on each element. We have to find on each element if there is an attribute, which is a directive. So to define a directive for today, we will just take the simplest way of defining a directive in Angular, which is an attribute for triggering the directive, and a single function to defining the directive, and the single function which will be the same that the posting function we define in the real Angular. And I will create an object which will store all my directives. I will call it Dora directives, an object. The key will be the attribute name, and the function, the value, the function of the directive. I will start an ngbind directive with a function and just log that I'm here. Console.log ngbind, nothing more. Okay, I never used Dora directive, that's okay. So in fact, I just need to iterate on the attributes of the element here and look for a directive with the good attribute name. That's not very complicated. Var directive equal Dora directives attribute.name. Okay. I try to get the directive in the object. If there is no directive, it will be empty. It's not a big deal. So if I've got something, I just want to launch the directive. And just like this. Okay, sorry, I forget too quickly. And just like this, we see that when we pass on the H1 elements, we just detect the ngbind directive and launch it. Of course, there is nothing happens for now, but we're good for a tiny compiler which reproduce the real compiler. So I'll remove my logs, and we can start working on the ngbind directive. So what's the role of the ngbind directive in Angular? It's It's not more, it's not much, and you can look at the real source code of Angular. The ngbind is a real good example because the source code of the real directive is very simple. And what we want to do is to watch for the property of the value of the attribute, and if there is a change in the scope for this property, we want to update the content of the element. So basically, it's the watch we just did there. So as I'm very lazy, I will just cut off, and put it there. Of course, I have to change some things, but there is something I forgot before, is that my directive will need parameters to work. And I will reproduce the same parameters than in the real Angular, which are the scope, which I took in parameter there, the current element, and the attributes, which is nothing more very interesting here, but it's to reproduce the same API. Okay, so I can take the parameters in argument there. There are scope, there are elements, there are attributes. In order to have the same API that's in the real posting function of Angular. So, what I want to watch is the value of the attributes. This part is a little dirty because I have to take the right attributes in the list, attributes.ngbind, and take the value. And take the value of the scope for this value. So it's a quite big line, but it's working. Now, when I've got a change, I just want to change the inner HTML of the element. Element.inner HTML equal new value. And that's it. That's the ngbind. And something should happen there. The hello parameters there has been updated with our model value. So that's a start. To get my demonstration full, I need an ng model. So if you ever look really at the ng model directive, you probably know that it's a quite bigger directive than I will do today. In fact, the ng model is just the controller, the directives are on the inputs, and so on. It's so much more complicated, but I will do it simple. So what's the goal of the ng model? ng model is the best reference of the two-way data binding of Angular. It has to do the first way of data binding from the model to the view, and so put the actual value of the property in the input. And if we type something in the input, we want the second way of data binding to work by updating the model with what the user has typed. So if we split the ng model in two, we understand that the first half of the ng model is nothing more than the ngbind. We want just the data binding from the model to the view. So I can just copy this code and put it here. I just have to change ngbind with ngModel. And when I want to change the value of an input, I don't want the inner HTML, but the element.value. And just like this, it should happen again. We have the binding from the model to the input. Okay. And the last part is the second way of data binding for the ng model. we want that when we type something in the input, we're going to catch the event and change the model. So that is basically what we prepared with the $apply function. We can cut this, and we want to change the model. When we want to change the model, of course, is when we add some event listener on the element, event listener key up function. I don't get the event object because, in fact, I don't mind what has been typed. I just want the current value of the element So at this point, I just have to point element.value. But I don't want to put it every time in hello, the hello parameter. I want to put it in the same property than before. And that should be working. Hello, Angular. Thanks. That was quite all I've got. Thanks for everything. All the code, the source code is there with the. And if you have any question, you can find me or find me on Twitter. Bye.